I've tried different recipes for butternut squash soup. This recipe I'm going to show you is one of my favorites because it's the easiest, and it also has several different flavors in it that make it so delicious. People I serve it to taste it and they wonder what's in it. They can't guess. Well, they might guess a couple of the things, but it's easy because I don't have you cube it ahead of time. Now let me tell you one other thing. This is a soup that you can freeze, so you can make it ahead and you can put it in an airtight container and put it in the freezer. But when you defrost it, you're going to need to put it in the blender again, because once it defrosts, it doesn't look so great. But put it in the blender for a few seconds, like 5 or 10 seconds, and it looks beautiful. And then heat it up afterward. So let's get started and I'll show you how to make it. First I need to roast the squash. So I'm going to preheat the oven to 350. And then I have a baking pan, a nonstick baking pan ready. Now this is one with low sides, but you can use one that's like a cake pan, like a 9.5 by 11. And then next we're going to slice the butternut squash in half. One of the things I like about this recipe is that we're not going to cube this. All we're going to do is cut it in half after slicing off the top and bottom, of course. So get your biggest knife. Seems like whenever I video cooking things, my dog is eating, which that's the sound of her bowl. Her licking her bowl. Okay. And then just cut it in half. If you want, you can score it. So another question is, what size is this butternut squash? Well, it doesn't have to be really big. So many times when I make this soup, I end up not using all of it in the soup, and then just eating the rest of it separately as a side dish. Okay, let's see where we're at here. Score that. See if it lines up. Luckily the center of these things has the seeds in it, so it's a bit hollow, so the fleshy part is on the outsides. Okay, we're almost ready to cut through. Like I've said in some other videos, I'm not the strongest person in the world. So, we're not going, okay, it's so just hollow at the bottom. Now, we're not going to cut these seeds out or anything. We're not going to cube it. And now we're ready to put it on the baking sheet. So on my baking sheet, I'm actually going to pour some water. This is just a 1/2 cup of water. And then I'm going to set down butternut squash, and I'm still waiting for the oven to preheat, but when it's all preheated, I'm going to put it in the oven and bake it for 45 minutes. And partway through, maybe 2 more times, I'm going to look in here and see if it needs more water, probably at the 20-minute mark and maybe the 35-minute mark, and if it needs more water, I'll put in another 1/2 cup of water just to keep it moist. It's been 20 minutes and I just want to show you how much water's left. There isn't a whole lot left. So I'm going to pour some more in, and then I'm going to check it again in 15 minutes, which would be the 35-minute mark. It's now been 35 minutes and there's still enough water in there. We have 10 minutes to go, so I'm not going to add any more water. And I'm just going to finish off the 45-minute baking. When the 45 minutes are up, take the butternut squash out of the oven and let it cool completely on the pan. Now that the squash is cooled, it's time to scoop out the seeds. If a knife or a spoon doesn't work right away, get a sharp knife and pull them out. And I already washed my hands. Isn't this easier to pull them out when they're cooked than when the thing is raw? Alright, get rid of all these seeds and do the other one. Just pull them out. Okay. And then I'm going to cut all of this squash away from the shell after I finally get all this out of the way. All right. So I'm going to cut it in sections. And use whatever knife you have to, and then you're just going to pull this skin off or slice it off. In some places it's going to pull off nicely and easily, in other you're going to have to slice it off with a knife, and just toss it into a large bowl. So we're going to do that for this whole thing. So I have a large bowl on the side. Let me see. You can kind of see it. Do it whatever way works more quickly for you. And then what we're going to do after I have all of this, actually I do make that smaller, we're going to mash it with a potato masher. Which if you don't have one of these yet, it's a handy little tool to have. Okay. So this part obviously takes a little longer. I should do this one in half. Some of it started to pull away on its own. Actually, here's some good. Oops. Oh, got some good squash in here. Why is my dog standing at my feet? I think she thinks she's going to get some squash. And I'm having a little allergy issue today. I don't know why, and last night. If I start sneezing, I'm going to turn off the camera. Alright. Now I'm going to rinse off my hands. And I'm going to move the cutting board, remove the bowl so you can see it. And I have, this is a potato masher. And you don't have to mash it finely, but you need to mash it till at least these big pieces are no longer big pieces. Okay, and actually this is pretty good. And now we're going to set this aside and we're going to get to the rest of the soup. We're going to start at the soup pan and we're going to put in 1 tablespoon of oil and heat it. For right now, while I'm chopping the vegetables, I'm just going to put it on medium to medium-low, but when I put the veggies in, I will increase the heat. Now let's go over to the vegetables. For right now, we're going to be chopping 1 large onion. So we need about 2 cups of onions. So 1 large, a shallot, and a jalapeno, or half of one, depending on how much you like. And then we're going to do a little bit of ginger. Later, we're going to chop 2 fresh pears. They have to be ripe, by the way. They cannot be green. So buy these ahead of time. Okay, so we'll start with the onion. And this soup ends up being pureed later in the blender. So it's okay if the onion is not in small, tiny little pieces, like bite-sized soup pieces, because we're going to be pureeing it anyway. So I'm peeling off this layer. Do that. And I like to put in these vertical. I don't cut through all the way to my left side over here in my left hand, but almost. And then I'll dice it this way. And then, because my cutting board is not next to my stove, I have a bowl over here, and I'm just going to put all that into the bowl. And do the second half. Oh, it's starting to get my eyes. Hang on, I gotta pause the video. Okay, I'm not going to show you what I look like, but I'm going to wear these onion goggles. These are so cool. Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that as I kick the tripod. They have these spongy areas, and they just go right over and keep you from crying. When I wore contact lenses years ago, I didn't have a problem with cutting onions, and then I had LASIK, and all of a sudden I didn't have that protective layer on my eye. All right, that's that. And next, I'll cut the shallot, which is, I'm going to rinse it off, which is basically like a little onion. And it's got a slightly different flavor. It's used a lot in soup recipes. And they tend to come with like 2 or 3 pieces once you pull it apart that has that papery outer layer. And these don't have to be awfully tiny either, because again, this is just going to be blended. I'll even use the small knife for this. I'm just cutting it down the middle and giving it a couple chops. Okay, jalapeno, I didn't rinse it off yet. I only like half, but that's me. So I'm going to do half. I don't want the seeds in it. I don't want this center part either, because this is the hottest part. You get enough flavor from this 1 jalapeno without making it too hot. Because if it's too hot, then that's all you're going to taste in the soup. Okay, I'm going to shake this over the sink. I don't want all these little seeds that are hot, actually. Okay, and I'm going to cut these I'll cut smaller, because I want them to get incorporated into the soup and to get cooked in the pot all right. Then the last thing is this ginger, and what we want is we want to fill a tablespoon with minced ginger. So I'm going to break a piece off here, and break one off here. And I'm actually going to peel it somewhat. These little knobs are hard to cut around. Sometimes I just cut them off. Okay, so that. And then slice it into pieces like this. And put it into the tablespoon. Let's see, cut this one. Oh my gosh, just a little bit of ginger adds such a great depth of flavor to this soup. Okay, so that's pretty much a tablespoon. So now I'm going to throw that in there. And now we're ready to go back over to the stove. Now I'm just going to add all of those vegetables to cut. And I'm going to also add 1¼ teaspoons of salt and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And I'm going to stir all of this so that all the vegetables get coated in the oil. And then I'm going to increase the heat to a little more than medium, so medium to medium high. And now I want to cook this for about 10 minutes, which is when the onion should start getting a little bit brown. And in the meantime, I'm going to cut the pears. The pears have been rinsed, so now I'm just going to cut off these stems and slice them down the middle. I'm going to take out the core out of each one, each quarter here. And then I'm going to peel them. Of course, if you want to eat that, you can. And do this to the whole pear. And you have to work kind of quickly because once in a while, in that 10 minutes, while the vegetables are cooking, you need to go back over to the vegetables and give them a stir. Alright, so actually I'm going to do that now. So when you see me not there, I'm stirring the onion. And back to the pears. And pouring. Half and peeling. This one's got a little something funky on it, but I'll trim out. Okay, and on to pear number 2. Core each of these. And peel. Okay. The pears add another great dimension of flavor to this soup. When I've made it for guests, people cannot figure out what's in it. With all of these great flavors. Okay. And I hear I'm going to go back over to the stove and give it a stir. And on to my last half. Okay, working in silence. My dog is at my feet wondering when I'm chopping. She doesn't even like pears. Okay. And then I'm going to put all of these pears. Actually, I'm going to cut them a little bit smaller. Bigger pieces. Oops. And I'm going to put it into a bowl. Let's see. Should bring them over to the stove. So let's go over to the stove next and check on the veggies. Okay, so I'll lean the camera in a little bit. These are doing pretty well. And I'm going to stir them up. And they're starting to stick to the bottom a little bit, but that's okay. Just take your spoon and scrape that up, because that's all good flavor. Because once you add liquid to this, you're not going to be able to do that. So I might even take a metal spoon, oddly it's slotted, and give it a scrape. Or if you have a spatula or something, just scrape all that from the bottom. Use it. See how I'm doing that? I'm just scraping all that good flavor from the bottom. And I don't want it sticking to the spoon. I actually want it in the pot. So I have a couple minutes left. So I'll turn off the camera and we'll come back when the 10 minutes are up. Now that the 10 minutes are up, I'm going to add the pears and stir that around. And I'm going to let that cook for 5 more minutes. So I'll set the timer for 5. Give it a good stir. Stir it once in a while during that 5. In the meantime, we're back to the squash. And what we're going to have to do is measure 3 cups of squash. And put it in another bowl. Okay, I just had 3. So I'm thinking the squash was probably about 2 1/4 pounds. Usually, the original recipe called for a 3-pound butternut squash, and it made just way too much. So this makes half, about 2 3/4. All right. So I'm just putting it in another. Actually, I didn't need to measure it. I just put it all in, right? Okay. So I'm going to go check the pears, and we're almost done with this stuff. The 5 minutes are up. So now what I'm going to do is put in all of that squash, and next I'm going to put in vegetable broth. You can use chicken broth if you want, but make sure you watch my video on how to make your own vegetable broth. It's really easy and it's cheap. So I have 4 cups there, and I need another 2, make 6, and I have 2 more ingredients to add. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of dried thyme, and my last ingredient is 1 tablespoon of honey, which obviously I'm going to need another spoon. Well, actually I'm going to stir it around. I don't have another spoon. They're all dirty. Get the honey out. Okay, my hands are clean. Alright, so now I'm going to increase the heat because I want to bring this to a boil. I'm just going to give it a quick stir just to bring everything together, and we'll come back when the soup is boiling. The soup is finally boiling. Now I'm going to reduce the heat to a simmer, and to help it simmer even better, I'm going to put a cover on it. And now we're going to set the timer for 15 minutes. The last step of this soup is to ladle it in batches into a blender. So I have the pot next to me, and just ladle up whatever's in here. Now we're going to blend it. Whatever you don't serve right away, you can store in an airtight container in the refrigerator. This gets really sticky. Alright, so you don't have to do it on too hot. Well, actually, let's see. Actually, you do need to put it on hot. So let me plate this up or bowl this up, and we'll see what it looks like in a bowl. In the bowl, it looks like this. If you use chicken stock, it's going to be a little lighter in color. My vegetable stock is a little bit deeper, but this is such a delicious soup, and that is how I make it. Now, isn't that easier than cutting a raw butternut squash into cubes? I mean, it's so much easier to just cut it in half and put it on a cookie sheet and let it just bake, and then to slice it up after it's cooked. This is one of my favorite soups, and I hope it will be one of yours too.